Guy Oil Super 95 gasoline gives you more reasons to drive and is available at 56 service stations nationwide. For affordable price, high performance, and high mileage, choose Guy Oil's Super 95 gasoline.
Fuel it up and drive!
Hi, good day, and welcome to another edition of Vantage Point. I'm your host, Swatlana Marshall, and with me I have Mr. Mervyn Williams. Mr. Williams, thank you so much for coming on our show.
Thanks for having me.
Today we'll be talking about elections. Elections will be held on the 2nd of March 2020. Mr. Williams, the APNU-AFC, you're an executive member of the PNCR, which forms a major part of the APNU-AFC coalition. The coalition launched its campaign on the 3rd of January. What's the central message when compared to 2015 when there was elections around that time?
Thank you very much again for having me. The APNU-AFC, since assuming government in 2015, has embarked upon a major developmental plan for this country. The evidence is clear. The evidence is available everywhere you turn in this country. I suppose the essential message that we want to communicate to the Guyanese population is that we should not stop this progress.
Don't stop the progress.
We should not. We should ensure that we re-elect President David Granger, re-elect the APNU plus AFC to government, so that the work that has started, the work that is necessary, will be continued. A lot was accomplished by a few people working very hard in back rooms, trying to hammer out policies, trying to hammer out programs, and the implementation was wide across this country. And so President Granger and his cabinet, in the view of the majority of Guyanese, deserve a second opportunity so that the work that was started in 2015 can continue.
You speak a lot about work done, and persons looking at this program may ask, what kind of work, what kind of policies were implemented over the last 4 years? What were some of the major projects the APNU-AFC implemented to cause the kind of development to which you speak?
I think central to the President's vision is an educated nation. And so a lot of work has been done to ensure that children get into school, that children are comfortable in school, that children are safe and protected in school, and that the education delivery process is enhanced, improved. In addition to that, there was the physical infrastructure that was put in place. Improved buildings, improved laboratories, improved accommodation, dormitory facilities, ease of access to school by way of providing free transportation by boats, bicycles, and buses. So when the children are in school, they benefit from books and breakfast and so on. So I think key to the President's vision for the development of this country is to raise the level of education in every citizen's right. Education, among the rights of every citizen, education is central. And the constitutional provision with respect to education is very, very clear. Education should be free from nursery to university. His Excellency the President has made it clear that that constitutional provision will be respected by his administration in its second term. In other words, life will be given to that provision that speaks to free education at the tertiary level. So, side by side with education is the improvement in the healthcare delivery sector. You have water ambulances, you have a faster responding corps of medical professionals all across the country. You have improvements in the healthcare delivery across Guyana's hinterland particularly, where boats and engines have been given out to villages and communities across the hinterland, where ambulances have been given out, the ones that run on the roads. There has been a focus on budgetary allocations where medical evacuation using aircrafts become necessary. There has been the focus on the provision of government-free Wi-Fi services, which allow for remote access to medical professionals, particularly in the area of surgery, where the general practitioners in Guyana's hinterland can and have been benefiting from the use of technology in the delivery of the healthcare services across the spectrum. So if those two sectors continue to grow at the rate they're growing, it means therefore that many other things will fall into place. You'll get better educated people in your police force, for example, in your military, in your public service. And if we continue as we intend to continue on the course, on the trajectory of enhancing medical and services and so on, it means that Guyana will be a healthier country, a nation of healthier people, living longer, contributing more to national development over time. So, yes, we are embarking or we have embarked on a new sector in our economy, the oil and gas sector, but the Guyanese citizen will be aware that there has been tremendous progress, even without revenues from this new sector. And with the advent of the extraction of forest oil not so long ago, and with Guyana having negotiated successfully the sale of its portion of forest oil, and the anticipated revenue that will flow from that, the Guyanese people can be comforted by the fact that having accomplished so much with so little, Guyana is on the path to accomplish a lot more when the revenues from oil and gas start to flow.
So are you saying that the APNU-AFC is a better position or a better manager of the country's resources when compared to its main opponent, the PPP?
Clearly, there's no real comparison there. Look, the PPP have put up a candidate for the presidency. He was a minister responsible for water. The water sector was a total calamity. Whenever there was a drought or a threat of a drought in Guyana's hinterland, there was a panic, because the few wells that were there were shallow wells, 30, 35 feet, and there were wells that were accumulating surface water. So when the water dried up, there was nothing to come from the well, and people suffered, crops suffered, animals suffered. The percentage of persons who had access to potable water was extremely low, somewhere in the region of 36% across Guyana. The records will now show that within the last 2.5 to 3 years, the work that this government has done in the water sector alone is now responsible for somewhere in the region of 86% of hinterland population having access to clean potable water, and somewhere in the region of 97% of the coastal residents in this country having access to clean potable water and reliable supply as well. There have been more than 48 wells drilled within the last 2 to 3 years. There have been water treatment plants erected, set up in all across Guyana. In fact, in another few days, we will be launching a new facility at Paramakatay. Paramakatay never had piped water before. They're having it now. We commissioned all across Region 9. And then there are new wells at Westminster on the West Bank. There's a new well at Iflot on the West Coast. There are 2 new wells in Linden, Amelia's Ward area, 2 new wells. So if you were to look at a single sector that was managed by the PPP's presidential candidate, you will reject him. Because if he failed in one single sector for which he had responsibility, are you going to now entrust him with management of all the sectors of this country's resources and activities? I doubt that. The Guyanese people are wise, and they make wise and informed choices. If you look at the PPP's candidate in housing, you will see that housing schemes were put up in swamps. The Tushan new housing scheme was a disaster. Yes, it is large, but it's a disaster. It was a catchment area for water overtopping from the Burusiri Conservancy. It was a wetland area, a marshland area that was set aside in the event there was excessive rain, so the water can be accumulated and managed and through the outflows systematically. But without any drainage adjustments, they gave out house lots. And now people are suffering whenever the weather changes for the worse. So the PPP is a calamitous failure. You know, I'm saying to Guyanese people, there is no other choice to lead this country but David Arthur Granger and the APNUFC.
You spoke a lot on, of course, PPP is the main opposition party, but there are other smaller parties who would have popped up since the no confidence motion in 2018. Do you see them influencing voters come March 2?
Let me start by saying that the advent of the formation of new political parties speaks volumes for Guyana's democracy. The freedom to associate, the freedom to hold a view, a political view, and the freedom to advocate for what you see as the best interests of the Guyanese people. And I think that President Granger and the APNUFC is to be commended for ensuring that people feel confident and people feel safe to come out and to articulate their positions and to advocate and to seek the support of the voting population of this country. I think that is a signal of things becoming better over a very short period of time. I do not believe that, from listening to the feed, the vibrations from the ground, I do not believe that the smaller parties are going to have a significant impact. I believe that in some of the cases, the formation of these new political parties really satisfy the agenda of the People's Progressive Party. The PPP knows that it has lost ground. It knows that it has been judged appropriately by the voting population of this country. And it seeks now to encourage the formation of new political parties in the hope that persons will gravitate away from the APNU-AFC coalition as they did away from the People's Progressive Party and go towards those smaller parties. It is the PPP's hope that if their mission is successful, that the voter take of the APNU-AFC will be reduced. And so my message to the voting population is stay focused, trust President David Granger, trust the APNU-AFC, and do not be misled by the operations of the PPP to distract you away from supporting the government that has led the largest developmental charge in the shortest time within the recent history of this country. For me, if you look historically at how the politics of this country operated, you will find, firstly, that Prime Minister Forbes Burnham was the man who first championed successfully coalition politics in this country. You will see that the People's Progressive Party consumed the most small political parties ever in this country. They consumed, demolished, destroyed the United Force, which was Mr. Burnham's first coalition partner. And a number of persons came out with new political parties that were consumed. Leslie Ramsamy, the United Republican Party, I think he was, Paul Tennessee, Asghar Ali, and the list is long. So these persons, and even GUARD, which was a movement supposedly established to be an alternative to the PPP and PNC. A lot of people were excited about GUARD And then GARD came out through Samuel Hines and this gentleman who was Minister of Labour for the PPP, Nanda Kishore Gopal, saying to the Guyanese people, a vote for the PPP is a vote for GARD. I mean, you manipulate people, you take people to the end, extending a hand of hope, and then in traditional PPP fashion, you disappoint them, causing them disillusionment and so on. So the PPP has consumed all of these political parties. On the other hand, the APNU AFC coalition is a model that Guyana, I think, needs more this time than ever before. It is a coalition that brings together 6 different political parties, each with their own constituency, each with their own ideology, each with their own different method of approaching and doing things. They have come together in a melting pot to serve the best interests of the people of this country. And every political party represents its constituency, brings to the table the issues, the needs, the concerns of their constituencies. And government formulates a plan that speaks to all of those issues, implements that plan and those programs to the satisfaction of all of those constituencies all across Guyana. The PNC, which is the principal partner in this coalition, does not seek to dominate, does not seek to consume, to dictate to and to control the other entities. And that is the essential difference between these two large organizations. And that is why the Guyanese population is going for the APNU plus AFC coalition, because of its outlook and because of its superior leadership.
Okay, you spoke a bit about the President's vision or plan of a decade of development starting this year until 2029. You mentioned an educated nation as well as the petroleum state utilizing the petroleum resources for the developed Guyana. When you compare what the APNU AFC is offering to what the PPP is offering, according to the PPP presidential candidate, Irfinali, they're promising 50,000 jobs, resuscitation of the Amila Falls project to maybe build a highway from Linden to Mabura and then further on to Letem, and then a new bridge across the Demerara Harbor Bridge. What is your assessment of those promises of their manifesto? I haven't seen the complete thing, but I know that's being peddled as the election season comes around.
The People's Progressive Party has turned out to be a Xerox copy machine. The PPP is a Xerox copy machine. Whenever the presidential candidate of the People's Progressive Party speaks of a plan, he is essentially speaking to something that President Granger has already done. When he speaks about building that road from Letem to Mabura, President Granger's administration has already secured the funding for the construction of that road. In fact, work has already begun between Wizrock and Mabura. When the PPP's presidential candidate speaks about bridging the Demerara Harbor Bridge, President Granger's administration has already done all of the feasibility studies, completed the design of the bridge, and secured the funding for that bridge. When the PPP's presidential candidate speaks about improving education, you can see from the results of the Caribbean examinations that President Granger's education policies, having been put into place, are already being fruitful. When you look at the hinterland dorms, the dormitory facility was established for hinterland students, you understand the seriousness of President Granger's vision for education. When you look at the amount of resources put into getting children into and keeping them in school, when you look at the resources put at the disposal of scholarships students, you understand the importance that education plays in the vision of President Granger. You see, when President Granger became the presidential candidate for the APNU plus AFC, the People's Progressive Party condemned what they called militarization. When Mr. Granger became president, they accused the APNU-AFC of militarizing government, and then it moved to militarizing the public service. You see, President Granger, having been a military officer for so long, understands clearly the competencies and the capabilities of trained officers of the military. And so you are seeing one rear admiral at least, one brigadier at least, two colonels, a number of lieutenant colonels in the lineup, in the APNU-AFC lineup I'm talking about here. And you heard the criticisms from the PPP. And when they couldn't get to photocopy a brigadier, they went to the supermarket and they bought one. It is all about copying from the APNU-AFC, copying from President Granger, and attempting to regurgitate those messages to their supporters in the hope that their supporters were listening to them when they say, do not pay attention to the APNU-AFC. But people are listening because more than 80 hinterland communities are connected by government-free Wi-Fi. So people are seeing these large rallies, more than 40,000 at Durban Park, tens of thousands at Hope Town. People are seeing small meetings in Buxton taking on the look of mini rallies. And people are more and more appreciating that the Guyanese population is behind President Granger. And I'm telling you, when you come to hinterland rallies, Lethem and Madhya and Mabaruma and so on, you're going to get a sense of a national broad-based support for President Granger and the APNU-AFC. And this is what is causing a lot of problems for the People's Progressive Party. They are now recognizing that their manifesto, which is a copy of the president's accomplishments, of the APNU-AFC accomplishments, is not bearing any weight in their constituencies. The only thing their constituency seem to be holding on to is the old age message of remember where you come from, vote for whoever we put up. I mean, the Prime Ministerial candidate for the PPP is a virtual unknown to the support base of the PPP. It is a classic case of the PPP attempting to mirror what the APNU-AFC leadership has put up.
Now that you've said that, I spoke to Rear Admiral Best yesterday, and he said that the Prime Ministerial candidate, Mr. Mark Phillips, is a mismatch when compared to President David Granger. Would you say the same? Do you think they'll be able to pull votes from the military and from the joint services?
If there was a worse term to use, I'd use it. But I can tell you this. Mr. Mark Phillips was commissioned as an officer by Forbes Burnham. And although he's a brigadier, he was answerable to Commander-in-Chief, who is David Arthur Granger. There is no comparison. Everyone knows that the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces is the officer of the person to whom the Chief of Staff reports. And I have been listening to people. I have friends all over, in the military, outside. Mr. Mark Phillips was never even popular in the Guyana Defense Force. I mean, I respect the gentleman as a learned gentleman. I respect him as a professional soldier. I respect the fact that he has served at the helm of the Guyana Defense Force. But when it comes to political competencies, when it comes to being able to lead at any level above that, I will seriously question that in Mr. Phillips. But I'm saying that if you were at the rally, that little rally that the PPP had in Kitty, where you could have walked quite freely without bumping into anyone, and you spoke to anybody, they tell you, no, I don't know him, but they put him up so I can support him. That's what you call the dyed in the wood PPP supporter. But they're objective young people now who are seeing beyond what their grandparents have been saying to them should be the basis for their vote. They are looking to policies, they are looking to programs, they are looking to development, they are looking to accomplishments. And when you compare 4.5 years to 23 years, it's like comparing cheese to chalk. The APNU AFC stands supreme, stands superior to the People's Progressive Party's 23 years in government. And I heard this gentleman, the bald-headed gentleman, the gentleman who told people to chase President Granger, I don't remember his name now. Jack Dale. Yeah, Jack Dale. I heard him saying on at the rally in Kitty, referring to when the APNU was in government before. The APNU was never in government before 2015. And so, if Jack Dale, who has been president for 12 years, a failed president for 12 years, can be confused by the accomplishment of the APNU AFC in 4.5 years to the extent that he can suggest that the APNU AFC was in government before, it means the PPP has lost its marbles, like they're going to lose the elections come March 2.
Tomorrow's nominations day, tell me a bit about the list of candidates the APNU AFC would be submitting to the Chief Elections Officer tomorrow. What could you say about that list? Would it be, you know, people often say, oh, the older folks take up most of the positions. Would we see a mixture of people, young, old?
What I can say to you
experienced
is that the list of candidates that the APNU AFC will put up there is a list that will be reflective of the coalition partners. It will be a list that is reflective of youth and gender equality. It will be a list that brings experience, a list that brings brilliance, a list that brings people who are prepared to do the hard work so that this country can be a better place. And it is a list that will be representative of the various geographic spaces across this country. It is a list that will represent the secular nature of our state, the multifaceted religious disposition of our state. It is a list that will reflect the ethnic diversity of our country. It is a list of people who have the potential, the capability, and the will to unite this country, to develop this country, and to make it a better place so that our children and grandchildren will be proud of all of us who are privileged to be on that list and who would be even more privileged to be extracted to give actual service.
Okay, all the candidates on the list would be required to sign a statutory declaration, and on that declaration they would have to say, well, I'm not a citizen of another state. And you know where I'm coming from. In 2018, when the no confidence motion was moved, you had a case of Mr. Charandas Prasad and other MPs, it was later discovered, had dual citizenship, and that is a major problem. 2015, I guess maybe persons did not look into it when they were signing, or they just say, well, nobody was going to find out. What mechanism did the party put in place to ensure that whatever you're signing in that declaration sheet, it's correct? I know you have to take an oath or do it in front of a JP, but yet still you saw persons in 2015 sign that declaration form, and yet they had a dual citizenship. The other thing is, you had a member of the APNU AFC who would have joined in or joined with the PPP to vote to move a no confidence motion against this current administration, what's the vetting process like? How do you identify persons who would not, maybe, to prevent a reoccurrence?
First, let me make the point that prior to 2018, there was never any heavy emphasis on the question of dual citizenship. You will recognize from looking at the last parliament, the 11th parliament, that there were a number of very senior political figures who held dual citizenship. Some of them having had more than 20 years of service in the National Assembly, people like Gail Teixeira and so on, from the People's Progressive Party. So that there was never any weighted emphasis on establishing whether or not a person held dual citizenship. Regarding the ruling of the court on the matter of dual citizenship, each partner within the coalition, as far as I understand, would have been essentially responsible for ensuring that their candidates that they proposed would have been screened. And then the declaration form speaks to the constitutional provisions so that each candidate had to be aware of those provisions that treated with a number of issues.
Yes.
And so when you sign that form, you're saying that I'm cognizant of the provisions identified and the consequences associated. And you swear that document before a justice of the peace, as you have said, so that the burden of responsibility is your own as the candidate. So I believe that the essential safeguard within the coalition would have been the mechanism required to be put in place by each of the partners. The Charandas Prasad issue, to me, is behind us. It is instructive in its own way in a number of areas. The focus now is on doing the work that is required to secure the votes to retain the presidency and to remain in government. To me, what has happened in the 4.5 years is important enough to be communicated to the voting population of this country. I do not believe that as a government, the AP and UAFC paid enough attention to speaking about its accomplishments. The AP and UAFC was consumed by the work of cleaning the mess that was left behind, managing the limited resources that would have been available, and using those resources to optimum effect in terms of how you plan and how your development rolls out. To the extent that the AP and UAFC administration was engrossed in the work of creating the opportunity for a better life, making provision for the creation of employment, self-employment, training to make people equipped, to cause people to become equipped to take up their own roles in nation building and so on. That bragging about the accomplishments eluded the administration. I believe that in the next, 52, 53 days, whatever remains before voting, it is up to the partners within the coalition to package the accomplishment of the AP and UAFC in government and to transmit that information to each party's constituency in such a way that people can understand that what is being seen in their village, in their community, in their neighborhood, in their municipality or in their region is but a small part of what the government was able to do nationally with limited resources. I think these next days before elections, it becomes very critical for the partners within the coalition to transfer that information to the voting population in this country. I see that as a political party function and not as a government function. And I believe if there was anything I would encourage our partners to do differently going into the second term is that we need to be proactive as political parties in disseminating information that is crucial to our country, so that people can understand. I can live in Wisma and appreciate what is happening in Parabara. I can live in Oriala and get a full sense of what is happening in Cashew Island. Even though we poles apart, the information is important. And I believe now we have the essential tools to do that with, because by the end of 2020, it is envisaged that between 300 and 350 villages and communities across Guyana will be benefiting from free government Wi-Fi. So that information being transferred is going to be easy. We have a number of radio stations, regional radio stations, which are manned by locals, and they can use, at the level of the region, those radio stations to communicate to people essential information having to do with the development of our country. That's where I would go.
Mr. Williams, as we wrap up today's program, tell me a bit about tomorrow. I know there's a lot of fanfare where the APNU AFC would be moving off from to head to the Umaniana. Tell me a bit about the contingency.
Well, if I were to base my assessment on that 40,000 plus Durban Park turnout and those thousands at Hope Town, and even the Buxton meeting, I would say to you that my expectation is that a large number of supporters of the APNU plus AFC coalition, a large number of supporters of His Excellency President David Granger, will converge on that little tarmac, the Bornham Court area.
Okay.
I imagine that thousands will come down there. I don't think supporters of the APNU plus AFC require an invitation. I know that spirits are high, expectations are bubbling, and in traditional fashion, Georgetowners particularly, and our brothers and sisters from Linden who miss absolutely nothing when it comes to APNU plus AFC, and of course our Region 5 supporters who have always been in the mix. Perhaps even persons from further afield, I believe, will converge on that area there. I think it's on the corner of Carmichael and Middle Streets. I anticipate that people will be there as early as 10 o'clock in the morning, perhaps even earlier. And then we will proceed to the Umaniana, where the leader of the list, His Excellency President David Arthur Granger, will be handing over the list of candidates for 10 geographic constituencies for the Parliament, for the national top-up list, and one each list for the 10 regional administrations, which are essentially, I believe, divisions of the, as GCOM will call them. So there will be an RDC list from regions 1 to 10, a geographic list of candidates for the Parliament from regions 1 to 10, and a national top-up list. These lists, when put together, will represent, in my view, the caliber of Guyanese to lead this country over the next 5 years. I envisage a sea of green and gold. I envisage a very loud crowd chanting slogans in support of the President and the APNU-FC coalition. Tomorrow is going to be a great day for this country, because tomorrow is when President David Arthur Granger will be presented as a presidential candidate to lead us in this country as the next president after March 2, 2020.
Mr. Williams, thank you so much for coming on today's program. To our viewers, thanks for looking at the program. Our next program will be on Monday because tomorrow we'll be having a live stream from Umaniyano, full coverage of Nominations Day. So do join us right here on our Facebook page. Do have a pleasant rest of the day. And remember, live coverage tomorrow from Umaniyano, and on Monday, another edition of Vantage Point. I've been your host, Svetlana Marshall. Bless up.